Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Payment Strategy Show. I'm Joshua Silver, founder and CEO of Rainforest. We help software platforms embed payment processing into their core product to grow revenue and improve customer retention. I'm here today with a very special guest, Taira Hall, who is Senior Vice President and Head of SMB Commercial at PayPal. Rainforest and PayPal recently announced an exciting collaboration, so I wanted to invite Taira on the show to share her expertise and discuss some of our work together. Taira, welcome to the show.
Joshua, thank you so much for having me today.
So to get started, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you first get into payments?
So I've always been fascinated by payments, both throughout my entire career trajectory. I started my career at a large global bank in Citi, where we were looking at how do we activate and support more businesses across small business, mid-market, and large enterprise. And payments was at the core of everything we did within the ecosystem in which we operated. And I thought it wasn't sufficient to see it from the bank side. We also really, for me, to understand payments at scale, needed an opportunity to understand the entire flywheel. So after Citi, I went to Visa to understand how the network approaches payments at scale, different components of the network operations, back end, as well as authorization and payment, diligence around the various tenants in which we played, and then went to the back end of really serving on the payment processing side. So it's been a wonderful career of really seeing it all the way through full circle in terms of the impact that payments have on real businesses in which they play.
Yeah, I think you're one of the few people in payments who's really seen it from all sides, the banks, the issuers, the processors, et cetera. So, really unique perspective. Now tell us, what are some of your key focus areas at PayPal today in your role?
So as part of the commercial organization, most of my focus is really driving the strategy and growth across the small business ecosystem. So that's everything from payments that we're going to discuss today to how we think about point of sale and omni-channel, which is increasingly so important to the small businesses we serve, particularly on the services-based side, lending and working capital-based solutions, as well as other value-add services. So really trying to understand the entire flywheel of small businesses and the opportunity to serve them from all facets of the ecosystem as a one-stop shop.
Very good. When it comes to payments, there are very few household names. PayPal is certainly one of them. Why is it that consumers like PayPal so much?
So PayPal sits in a really unique portion of the ecosystem, as I was talking about. And, the way I think about PayPal is it removes doubt at the moment of payment. First of all, is size and scale. We have 400 million consumers globally, 20 million small businesses across 200 markets. So there's size and scale that really speaks to the power of the network and the ability for us to move money across the ecosystem. But more importantly, we're really at the forefront of thinking about that conversion from cash and check or really offline payments onto online in a much more enhanced digitally native ecosystem. And so as a team, as we think about those digitally native forms of commerce, we're looking at ways to improve that, to kind of create much more of an embedded experience for those small business customers and still leverage the trust and scale that PayPal is known for. One of the areas that, in particular, I talked a bit about Omni, is making sure that across all channels and devices, we're serving small businesses with so things like, for small business customers, not having to re-enter payment details or their KYC or KYB information or having to juggle credentials across those various ecosystems. That's one of the things that PayPal enables, is really the ability to onboard and to select once, but then be exposed to a much broader ecosystem of core payment capabilities that we bring to bear.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, as someone who grew up kind of alongside the internet, I vividly remember, signing up for PayPal in a time certainly when there wasn't the trust and security that there is today, and fast forward, decades later, and we still have that staying power. Not only domestically in the US, but certainly globally. We talked a little bit about the consumer side. I want to talk a bit more about the merchant side, though. Merchants certainly have a lot of options when it comes to payment acceptance. Can you talk a little bit about what the problems are that PayPal solves specifically for merchants and how they benefit from it?
Yes, when you think about the merchant part of the ecosystem, there are various facets of what the merchant is really ultimately trying to solve for. On the payment side, it's really making sure that that checkout experience or even invoicing experience is seamless, that there's convenience for everyday purchases, that when it comes to flexibility for large ticket transactions, and even merchant credibility and conversion and how they think about average order value, those are all aspects that we are thinking through and making sure that we're offering supporting services. So as you're growing your business, as you're trying to offer more streamlined experiences within that checkout, you really want that to be your one-stop shop, and you want to make sure you get the highest conversion and opportunities to engender those consumers into that experience over time. On the other side with merchants is really around customer acquisition. And so we've been spending a lot of time, including in our discussions with you on the Rainforest piece, of thinking about how do you drive consumer acquisition to small business customers. With Venmo, for example, we've been really focused on the monetization of word of mouth. When you're a services-based business, one of the biggest challenges you have is how do you find consumers in your local market, in your local ecosystem. And so leveraging small businesses and the power of consumers being able to promote those small businesses, to say that they've paid with Venmo, and that they can then recommend service-based businesses within their local markets and use that to sort of tell friends and family and neighbors about that experience. That creates really positive momentum and an opportunity for small businesses to think about that consumer acquisitions tranche. And then I think the third piece is making sure that we have a holistic set of value-add services. So you and I have talked about the opportunity to really embed lending, working capital, credit cards, tools to facilitate merchants being able to grow and expand much more so in the ecosystems, whether that is that they're at the phase of startup, whether they're growing in terms of their core operations, the size of their business, the locations they serve, their cyclicality to their business. So we want to create even more opportunities to attach those value-add services into the ecosystem, and ideally do it in a one-stop shop. So again, you sort of get the trifecta of how do you optimize payments, how do you think about customer acquisition, and then how do you create other value-add services so you're not having to go to other providers over time to be able to really power that full stack.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think as fellow fintech people, we spend a lot of time focused on really large, massive platforms and solving the needs of the Fortune 1000 retailers, things like that. But when you talk to mainstream, America and, SMBs that are just trying to make it, they have a lot of needs that are not being met by kind of internet-centric companies necessarily. And so I love the fact that you guys are providing capital, you're kind of merging some social aspects to commerce. It's a very different approach than, we hear in the focus of stable coins and AI and all these other things, when you still have millions and millions of SMBs out there that are trying to conduct business and get paid, right? And that's, I think, what's exciting to me about some of the work that PayPal is doing. To that end, I want to deep dive a little bit into our recent collaboration. We've embedded PayPal directly into Rainforest's core product. PayPal has worked with a lot of payment providers over the years. I'm curious, from your perspective, why was the opportunity to work with Rainforest exciting enough to pursue? And what made this integration maybe different than some of the others that you've seen in the past?
Well, I would tell you on the Rainforest side, just your deep expertise in the vertical software space. You and I have had numerous conversations on how not all software is the same. And so even within a verticalized motion, there are different facets that you're serving, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's home services, whether it's beauty and wellness. There is a knowledge set that I think really speaks to how do you play in that market ecosystem and what Rainforest has been able to bring to those software providers has been sort of one of those things that I personally have just really valued in the working relationship. I think the other thing is, payments at the end of the day is such a core capability that you need payment experts when you're embarking on this journey. Software is the point at which you're meeting small business need, but you have to have people who speak payments, who know payments, who've grown up in that ecosystem. So it's everything from, the less prominent areas that maybe people like to talk about day to day, but it's the disputes, it's reconciliation, it's how you think about real-time data and real-time reporting, so that those small businesses feel that they have the right tools at their fingertips through this trusted partner that Rainforest is really building an ecosystem for. So that was a big portion of what we were really seeking as we sought a partner in this space. And I think the other point I would say is this was much more than adding a PayPal button into an ecosystem. It was embedding an end-to-end journey and a set of assets into it. So we talked about PayPal in terms of the breadth and depth and sort of trust that it engenders into the ecosystem. Venmo with much of that sort of consumer acquisition. How do we transform that into much more of a tool for small businesses, but also areas like, PayPal Pay Later, where what we found on the ground is small businesses seeking different ways and different options to provide their consumers, to offer them working capital solutions. And so we brought the power of all of those assets and the way the Rainforest was thinking about really having a one-stop shop so that cash and check were no longer, such a majority of the payments in this market, but that there were more options available to those software platforms to do it once, to set it up, and really have that surround sound also of the white glove service that you guys are offering to really bring into the equation.
For software platforms or ISVs, especially those who already enable payment acceptance via traditional methods like card, like ACH, why do you think they should consider adding PayPal? What do you think is the upside for those software platforms? We've talked about a little from the merchant side, but what about the software platforms?
Yeah, from the software platform side, there is so much complexity. I remember from one of the last roles I was at, really getting into talking to 100 different ISVs at various points in time. And many of the learnings were similar, which is juggling multiple integrations and multiple partners that you then had to pull into a coherent, expression or really user interface, but more so than even how it appeared on the front end. It was the complexity of managing the payments and the pieces on the other ends, the onboarding flows, the reporting systems. It created friction. It could create latency. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that small businesses had to look for other alternatives in terms of how do they operate off platform, which was ultimately, not aligned with the value that the software platform was looking to provide. We are thinking about it in partnership with you as sort of one unified, reliable payments experience that software platforms can look at. And there is workflow benefits associated with that. There are auth rate benefits associated with that. There is consistency in how you serve those customers, even from a customer service and support perspective. And so that is really what we're bringing to the forefront, particularly with the partnership that we're working on together. In addition, the fact that Rainforest focuses so much on the white glove service, mm-hmm. I think is very important. How do you navigate this increasingly complex ecosystem and make sure that it's seamless and that ultimately it comes together in a unified whole? Those are the types of things that were paramount when we were speaking to ISVs. They had so much complexity in what they were seeing in the market. How do you sort of cut through that and get to a single place that offers you the best depth of experience with the core experts that can help you, drive the business outcome and the business success?
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, this is certainly more of a complete unified integration than just adding the PayPal button. I think from our perspective, we look at it as one onboarding, whether it's for card, ACH, PayPal, Venmo, Pay Later, one set of reports, one customer service channel, one contract, one bill, one set of fees, all of these things that seem incredibly simple to end consumers and to end merchants and to end software platforms. Behind the scenes, it's incredibly complex to unify the flows, the timing, the disparate onboarding requirements, the risk management between PayPal and Rainforest. There's a lot that goes into making this entirely seamless. We certainly had multiple teams spending, months and months, working through all the details. Kind of curious from your perspective, Taira, what are some of the unique things that PayPal had to do behind the scenes to make this unified experience so seamless for all of our end customers and merchants and platforms?
Well, I think to the point you were raising, I mean, this is really a team effort. And so when you think about the components of product engineering, commercial, go-to-market, support, risk, critical component of that, and compliance, how do you onboard these merchants that we're serving holistically? So a lot of the platform components had been capabilities that we had been building over the past year, but what Rainforest really enabled us to think through even more holistically was, the points of potential friction, right? You talked about single unified reporting. You talked about even the onboarding experience. It needs to be where small businesses don't feel that they have to re-enter information in multiple points. I mean, ideally, you click a button and you're up and working and you're integrated within the platform that you use today to manage so much of your business operations. So I think the biggest piece for us was really bringing together this holistic team to surround Rainforest and say, what have we built as the core native platform that we're leveraging? But how do we bring these subject matter experts in to really engineer step by step? I think as we move forward in ISVs and other vertical software platforms, you need people who've really sat in these ecosystems, who've understood how a small business engages with those platforms. And verticalist specialization, while I still believe that 80% of much of the payment ecosystem is a horizontal that can serve multiple providers, whether it's, storage facilities or doctor's offices or medical equipment, there is still 20% that has uniqueness to it, whether it's the data that's underlying, it's the way they need to get paid, it's, temporary workers that need payouts at different points in time. And so how do you manage that more effectively? So those were the pieces where it just was a tremendous partnership, and you walking us through what you need for those platforms that you serve, and then us enabling, really the platform and the risk and compliance or recon and other teams to come together around that to deliver the most seamless, scalable, embedded experience we could provide.
Yeah, it certainly has been an amazing opportunity to collaborate between the two companies. In the last few minutes here, I want to zoom out and talk less about Rainforest and PayPal specifically, but more about your experience with vertical software and platforms in general. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see platforms make when it comes to their checkout experience, and how do those mistakes impact processing volume for those platforms?
Yeah, so I think the biggest mistake is treating payments as an afterthought instead of a core workflow. Fragmented, unfamiliar checkout experiences that cause customers to delay, to abandon, to move payments off platform to cash or check. We see that, when that experience is not really thought through end to end. And so I believe that every extra step in checkout is a chance to lose the payment. So having that mentality and that desire to uncover every step in the way that could lead to friction or even the abandonment of a cart. And so how do you bring back that consumer and re-engage them? What we want to do is just make sure that we're working with partners that understand that having payments at the center of what they're doing and is a core attribute, actually a core driver of the value that they provide, surrounded by the expertise of people who've come from and worked in payments. That's really one of the largest mistakes we see. It's not a commodity. It needs to be a core asset.
I love that viewpoint. As you think about payment trends, which ones are you watching in the next few years that are likely to impact vertical software companies? And how do you think that SaaS leaders can best prepare for these changes?
So there are a couple trends. Maybe I'll talk about some of the short-term ones that I've alluded to, but then also talk about, AI and agentic as well.
Okay.
Within Venmo, as I was talking about, I think the value of commerce, of consumer acquisition, of people natively being able to discover a service through their friends rather than traditional advertising. When I look for an electrician in my hometown, noticing on a feed, on a trusted feed, that a friend or someone that I'm tied to through my local community has, paid on Venmo, and even more so, refers a service-based business, that electrician to me, and really feels that they delivered excellent service. That I think is going to be increasingly the norm, which is how does advertising become much more centralized, much more localized, and enable people to have trusted discovery and social proof. I'm really fascinated with how that is going to really continue to support not only checkout, but the broader ecosystem in which small businesses operate. I think on the agentic side, as you sort of look out the next few years, agentic commerce is a paradigm shift, and AI agents are projected to initiate 30% of shopping journeys, 3 to 5 trillion in GMV by 2030. So the next era of payments is really going to have to be much more integrated into how commerce is being reshaped, and giving merchants and small businesses the tools and the opportunities to play within those ecosystems. So again, going back to my electrician example, how customers will find you. It's going to increasingly be that, for that homeowner, a plumber, you might be finding them on an AI service, or you might be using AI to help select who in your local city and where will they, how do you show up with high presentment, with high confidence, with high trust. On the PayPal side, as part of that work, we want to be the trusted enablement layer for agentic commerce. So that means still making sure that merchants are empowered to own how they show up and how they're presented, but using assets like identity, authentication, fraud protection to surround it, but still being able to operate within these new payment protocols. So we have Shop Sync, we have Agent Ready, we have different facets of how we're bringing those tools to life. And then I think there's training and education that can be incredibly meaningful too in this segment. So how do we collectively with partners like Rainforest, really start to teach on the tools and on the ways that commerce is going to operate in the next even 5 to 10 years to reach these new channels and grow with confidence and really meeting those customers where they shop next. So those are some of the things I'm most excited about. It's sort of the short-term vector of how that's being expressed, and then the longer-term opportunity to redefine the next paradigm shift in commerce, but do it in partnership with education, with trust,
Yep.
And reliability, with still the payment offering that layer off of which everything else will be built.
Yeah, certainly some interesting trends, ones that we're watching closely. For our listeners out there, we actually had an episode not too long ago specifically on agentic commerce. So I'd encourage you to go back in the show archives and you can check out a detailed deep dive into that. But Taira, we're pretty much out of time. Last question I like to ask all guests. If you could give vertical software leaders just one piece of advice to help them grow their embedded payments business, what would it be?
My one piece of advice is when payments feel effortless, growth follows. And I think if we can rally around that and figure out different ways to express that within the businesses that we lead, I think you will see tremendous growth. I think you will see customer satisfaction. I think you will see merchants engaging in new ways and teaching us as the payment platforms even more as to how we create a roadmap and a set of tools and assets that will follow them through. So I'm really excited where payments is going in the next few years. And I want Joshua again to thank you so much for the partnership with Rainforest. We're just thrilled. I know we'll have more to share in the coming months.
Yeah. Taira Hall, Senior Vice President, Head of SMB Commercial at PayPal. Thank you so much for being with us, Taira. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.